In 1962, having recovered from a major heart attack, Ian Fleming travels to Japan to research his latest James Bond adventure, You Only Live Twice. When the book is released in 1964, it becomes an immediate bestseller. But critics are struck by the reoccurring images of death throughout the story. When the producers come to make the film, they are reminded of Fleming's haiku poem, which introduces the novel. You only live twice, once when you are born, and once when you look death in the face. Ever since the release of the third James Bond movie, Goldfinger, producers hoped to film on Her Majesty's Secret Service. But the opportunity to shoot Thunderball and the need for winter locations delay the project.
We did You Only Live Twice instead. And that turned out to be quite a problem.
In fact, the production of the fifth James Bond film proves to be one of the most challenging and dangerous ever undertaken. First, the producers must find a director who can handle the enormous scope of a Bond film. Producer Cubby Broccoli makes the call to Lewis Gilbert, director of many war movies and currently the hit film Alfie.
He rang me one night and said that he'd seen Alfie and how would I like to do the next James Bond film.
Initially, Gilbert turns down the job.
And then Cubby rang me again the next morning and said, listen, you can't turn this film down, you know, because there's the world's largest cinema audience waiting to see what kind of a hash you're going to make of it.
Lewis Gilbert brings on Academy Award-winning director of photography, Freddie Young.
I said to Cubby, look, let's get somebody who is one of the great artists of British cinema.
We all set off to Japan. Cubby, Harry, Freddie Young, Lewis Gilbert and myself.
Funnily enough, of course, I ran into Cubby and Lewis Gilbert in Tokyo, which I was visiting for a holiday. Cubby kept saying to me, why don't you come with us and do the second unit?
The locations in Tokyo were no problem, and places like Kyoto, but we couldn't find really any of the castles and locations that Ian Fleming had talked about. So we decided that we charter 2 helicopters.
And this was very, very nerve-wracking.
Lewis had never flown in a helicopter before, so he was absolutely terrified. Our pilot, his hands were shaking badly.
The oldest man you've ever seen. And he started to point at the map with a very, very shaky hand. Of course, Cubby thought that was very funny, so did Ken Adam. And he suddenly started up, and off he went. We just got about 1,000 feet. He suddenly turned to me, and he went, me, kamikaze pilot. And I thought, my God, here we are flying with the only living kamikaze pilot.
But he was a wonderful pilot.
In fact, he was the best pilot that we had. He was terrific.
We covered literally 2/3 of Japan in about 3 weeks, flying 7 hours every day.
We flew all over Japan looking for a castle that was on the sea, and apparently they never built castles anywhere near the sea.
It was quite a strenuous experience until we found this unbelievable volcanic area on Kyushu, and flying over this area was really dramatic. Looked almost like a moonscape.
Cubby always looked for a hook, what he called a hook, for the storyline. When he saw the top of this volcano, that was his hook. And he thought everything is going to now start out of this.
We decided that it would be interesting to have the villain live in one of these extinct craters.
It wasn't really water, but was something that could pull back. And, well, Ken Adam, of course, absolutely loved that. I mean, he went crazy as soon as the idea was mooted.
Cubby sort of gave me a sidelong glance and said, can you do it?
And that was the beginning of the story, really. That's how it came about.
The first challenge is leaving Japan alive.
It just happened at that time that a Canadian DC-8 came into land at Tokyo Airport and undershot the runway and hit all the beacons. The next morning, I had breakfast with the BOAC crew, and I asked the captain where he was going. He said, well, we are going to London, but we are going via Hong Kong.
The morning that they were booked on the plane, they got a call that they could see the ninja training film that moment.
And so we had to cancel the trip. And about an hour and a half later, there was not one person alive on that plane.
That plane crashed into a mountain.
It was quite horrifying.
I remember Harry going off about 2 days later, and everybody was so nervous.
Also remember, we were in serious trouble because the film had a release date. Sean's contract was running out, and we had no script. So the pressure was on everybody, and we lost the writer.
After Harold Jack Bloom's departure, the producers decide to hire noted short story writer Roald Dahl.
The producers had read Roald's stories, and they thought he would be the lovely writer for You Only Live Twice.
Roald Dahl had been a friend of Ian Fleming's, but is unproven as a screenwriter.
I've written a lot of stories with sin, not a lot with sex or sadism.
He was a very clever writer in offbeat subjects.
Based on Cubby Broccoli's initial idea, much of the story takes place inside a hollowed-out volcano. Ken Adam must produce the most challenging set of his career.
The challenge appealed to me also, you know, the shape of the volcano. I knew if it didn't work, I would never work in movies again.
Ken Adam was an interesting man. Once he knew what he was going to do, he would settle down and he'd produce the most amazing drawings.
When I had done 2 or 3 sketches, Cubby said, well, looks interesting. How much is it going to cost? You know? I quoted $1 million, and that was an enormous amount of money. And Cubby didn't blink an eyelid. And he said, if you can do it for $1 million, go ahead. And then my worries started.
The filmmakers have other worries. Casting. Director Gilbert makes a brilliant choice for the role of Taiga Tanaka. Japanese actor Tetsuro Tamba.
I worked with Tamba on another film where we taught him English, so it was a big bonus to have Tamba, who was a karate expert.
Casting actresses proves far more difficult.
I said, he wants a woman, doesn't he, to chase around and fall in love with. And they said, well, 3 would be better.
Many of Europe's top actresses and models compete for the role of assassin Helga Brandt.
In a Bond film, they kind of like to have unknown girls if they can.
To discover?
Yes. Well, not only discover, but it somehow gives a sense of realism to the film.
The public wants to see extremely pretty girl. I'm not that pretty.
First, sex appeal. And she must be tough.
Enjoy yourself.
I usually do.
What's a nice girl like you doing in a place like this?
They were looking for a blonde, blue-eyed, tall German girl, and they wound up with me. So they had to do something about it, and they gave me high heels, and he did my hair.
Mr. Osato believes in a healthy chest.
One of our problems on the film was that in order to shoot in Japan, they were very, very keen for us to use real Japanese girls.
And one of the things that we did do, of course, was test girls for the leading parts.
It was very difficult to find a girl who could speak even some English, who was something of an actress.
There was not a single Japanese actress that spoke English.
We siphoned it down to 2 who the Japanese liked, and they were rather pretty girls.
So the idea was that where they would be brought to England, taught English, be involved in a purely English-speaking atmosphere of the United Kingdom where nobody speaks Japanese.
Akiko Wakabayashi was very good. She really learned very, very fast.
I think I will enjoy very much serving under you.
The other girl, Mia, tried desperately hard, And I saw Tamba and I said, look, Tamba, this is a big problem to us. It's no good for her and it's no good for us. Will you take her out to dinner and tell her that she has to go back to Japan? He looked a bit glum and he said, well, I'll try. And he took her out that night, and the next morning he came in and I said, well, Tamba, how did it go? He said, tonight she commits suicide. She will jump out of the window at the Dorchester.
Lewis said, you know, he did literally go cold at that point.
So, of course, I rushed to Harry and rushed to Cubby and said, my God, we've got a problem here. Cubby said, you know, I don't think she'd be so bad in the film, which we all agreed very quickly that she wouldn't be so bad in the film.
Ultimately, Miyahama switches parts with Akiko Wakabayashi, and Akiko suggests her new character not be called Suki, but Aki. The film's signature gadget is found by Ken Adam.
I was listening one morning while shaving to Jack DeManio's radio program, and he had this Wing Commander Wallace talking about his gyrocopter. I rang up the BBC and they put me in touch with Wallace.
At the end of the interview, he said, would you like to have a fight with a helicopter with one of them, Ken? And I said, give me half a chance.
And he brought his gyrocopter to Pinewood Studios to demonstrate it.
When I landed, Cubby Broccoli said, yes, he said, we shall want it in Japan in 6 weeks' time.
The Boy Scout and me immediately redesigned it as a war machine.
And of course that was popped into the script straight away.
Production begins on July the 4th, 1966, with the death of 007.
This we thought would be interesting to kill off Sean in the first few minutes, which would be very mysterious.
I knew Sean before because we had some mutual friends.
Why do Chinese girls taste different from all other girls?
You think we better, huh? I wasn't particularly worried about, being in bed with him. Who would?
Maybe offer you a glass of champagne, Mr. Fisher.
And it was my first shooting day, and I remember very well it was nearly my last one.
Are you really sure you won't change your mind?
Well, if you insist.
The cameraman said, I have to do another correction, come out. So I went out, and as soon as I left that bar, a big, big light cracked down directly in the middle of that bar. So I would have been crushed. I really would have been crushed.
Other dangers are far more calculated. Stunt coordinator Bob Simmons and champion wrestler Peter Fanine Mavia stage a brutal fight. Each move is carefully choreographed.
In my experience, my 52 years experience in films, I found that stuntmen are the most professional people in the world. I mean, their life depends on it.
Don't worry about the pool of blood, because there he is lying there, dead.
Each stunt in the fight is discussed in detail. The end result? Smashing. At the end of July, the unit moves to Japan. En route, Sean Connery makes a startling announcement.
I can remember saying to Sean, look, Sean, it's silly not to keep on playing Bond, because whilst you're playing Bond, you can do anything in the world that you want to do.
Nonetheless, Sean and the producers find themselves unable to come to terms on a contract for future Bond projects. Some in the press speculate that this will mark the death of James Bond. Upon arrival in Japan, Connery is swarmed by reporters.
Well, the first day, the first morning, there were hundreds of these people.
Now, he's here, and he has not been given the privilege and respect of Japan for a certain amount of privacy.
We had to hire in a special force of security guards to protect the set and to protect him.
He hasn't even had his lunch right now. He had to go back up to his room because he didn't have the privacy of having a little lunch.
On July the 31st, the crew moves to the remote village of Akime. The key crew members are flown in by helicopter, as the location is a 3-hour drive from the nearest hotel. The crush of fans and press trying to get photos of Connery force local police to set up checkpoints on all roads.
I think he's tried beyond normal limits. I mean, everywhere you go, you can't be by yourself at all, really.
The press find ways around the police blockade, much to the distress of the crew. With daily temperatures over 100 degrees, pressures mount on location.
I must insist that you don't say anything until I give you instructions.
Tell him to go into the cave.
But producer Cubby Broccoli works to make the crew as comfortable as possible.
If the picture is not going to be good, then I'm afraid it's not really going to be the fault of the producers in this sense. If I said today, look, I want 5,000 people flown in from Tokyo, I'm sure they'd be flown in, you know.
When some of the actresses are unable to swim in the strong ocean currents, Sean Connery's wife, Diane Cholento, dives in.
Diane, who was a very athletic kind of girl, oh, don't worry, she said, I'll double for them. And of course she doubled for about 5 of them, jumping in and out of the water and swimming around, and she really saved the day.
The most dangerous filming takes place above the volcanoes, some of which remain very active.
When I was making the film, I couldn't enjoy myself very much. It was all rather too serious. And a lot of the takeoffs and landings were on most hair-raising places.
He took off on a road, just an ordinary road.
It was a cliff-edge road that actually turned. On one side was a Japanese cemetery with a big gully before you got to it. The other was about a 100-foot drop down into the sea.
So I said to him, would you take off in the opposite direction? Oh, he said, that would be very difficult. I said, well, it's the only way we're going to get the shot.
And you had to approach through a sort of ravine, but it was the only place I could use.
I thought, my God, he's never going to make this. This poor chap's going to be crushed.
Then someone would come along and say, number 2 camera had a hair in the gate. Got to do it again. Every time you took off on a place like that, you think this could be one too many.
Suddenly you saw this thing slowly lifted to the air, and everybody heaved a great sigh of relief.
Sometimes you would land and just slither to a stop on a cliff edge and think, I've still got little Nellie.
He would do all sorts of things that not many pilots would do in this crazy little plane.
I did 85 takeoffs and landings for 46 hours in the air for about 7.5 minutes on the screen.
The filming proves risky, not just to the pilots, but to one cameraman in particular.
Johnny Jordan was the aerial cameraman, and he had to film the aerial battle between the 4 helicopters and the gyrocopter.
He'd made quite a niche for himself in aerial photography. He loved that, and he was quite brilliant at it.
At 6,000 feet, when I was doing a shot going straight towards the camera helicopter, and once or twice I was rather closer to the camera helicopter than my intention had been. And I'd been flying long enough to realise that it was the altitude that was having an effect.
For cameraman Johnny Jordan, the shifting air currents would have devastating consequences.
Another helicopter was supposed to go underneath him, and there was an updraft of air.
And his rotor blade sliced through the skid.
And the propeller went right through his foot.
He was quite seriously injured.
Typical of a cameraman, he immediately panned down to see his leg hanging off.
The Spectre helicopter crashed on the mountainside, and this saved the pilot. He didn't get injured at all.
But the helicopter with Johnny Jordan, now damaged, must make an emergency landing. At the controls, none other than the ex-kamikaze pilot who helped scout locations.
He did a magnificent job in getting the aircraft down without rolling over, because the skid on one side had been cut away, and they managed to get some blocks of stone, and it must have been a help to John to get him out in time.
There was a convention of surgeons very close to where this accident happened, and he was rushed to this theater, and they operated on him.
And they thought they could put the foot back, which they did do.
Immediately, filmmakers cancel shooting of the helicopter battle. Soon, Johnny Jordan is flown back to London. On location, filming continues with other innovative action scenes.
Well, there was one scene where the heavies were riding along, and they didn't know how to get rid of them. And I said, why don't you have a plane with a magnet and have it fly over, attach to the car, pick it up.
But that's an absolutely crazy idea, that a magnet can lift a car. But that was it. And then it built from that. Well, OK, what happens here? Oh, it's a helicopter does it, and what's going to happen? Oh, we dump it in the middle of Tokyo Bay. So the thing always developed from that.
For a major fight sequence, Lewis Gilbert takes a different approach.
Fight scenes are always fairly close. And when I saw Kobe docks and the rooftops, I suddenly got an idea that it would be a very interesting shot to fly over the rooftops with a running kind of battle.
filmmakers take over the recently restored Himeji Castle as a ninja training school and gather a crowd of 8,000 for a grand champion sumo match.
They will not do it unless it's real. You can't do like all in wrestling and just shout, "Fall now." They have to do it for real.
And all those wonderful crowd sounds were used, were original soundtracks. The actual falls, I remember, were very dramatic, and the cries they made and the slapping of the bodies.
Back at Pinewood Studios, crews prepare for the return of the film to England, working to complete Ken Adams' mammoth volcano set.
The dimensions of that volcano set were well over 450 feet to the long shot area which we had tented in. This artificial inclined lake was 120 feet high.
I don't think any of us realised quite how big it was going to be until they started putting up the girders that towered over the entire studio complex.
It's no longer a film set building, but something quite different.
I'm not sure whether the producers even realised whether Ken was they probably thought he was working in feet when he was working in metres.
One has to be a little crazy, and I think if I look back at it, I was a little crazy.
They used more steel for building that crater than they used for the Hilton in London.
The plasters and riggers wanted danger money, and rightly so.
And all of us that were hardened professionals used to give up our lunch hours just to go and watch the progress of the building of that set. I remember the guys all came over from UA, and one said to the other, "God," he said, do you realise this set is more expensive than Dr. No?"
With a moving heliport, flying in actual helicopters.
We couldn't believe what was happening there. Mini Mokes running around, rockets going through a roof that would move. I mean, it's just unbelievable.
All the wise guys at Pinewood in the industry said, "Set is too big, nobody can light it. There isn't a cameraman in the world who can light it."
Cinematographer Freddie Young proves to be up to the challenge.
Freddie had a look at the model and he said, "No problem. I can light it."
Young later wrote that it took practically every lamp in the studio to light the set.
It was probably the most ambitious project of interior-exteriors had ever undertaken.
Shooting on the massive stage begins on October the 31st, with David Davenport doubling for Sean Connery. Before long, filmmakers face an unexpected problem.
The casting of Blofeld was always going to be difficult.
I think that was a Harry Saltzman casting.
I didn't see him till the first morning that we were going to use him because he hadn't arrived in the country. It was such a last-minute substitute. And suddenly in walked a rather benevolent Father Christmas, rather sweet-looking old man. Cubby said, "My God, this is ridiculous. What are we going to do?" I said, "Well, we'll just see what we's here, so we might as well film him."
When it comes to a James Bond film, when you're running probably even in those days at $100,000 a day, minimum, you're making a big commercial decision to recast.
The crew shoots for 5 days with John Werrick before Lewis Gilbert realises the part must be recast.
I had to go to Cubby and say, "Look, we've got the same problem. But this time I know that he won't commit suicide because he is a well-known Czech actor."
One day I turned up, I suddenly realised that the person sitting behind me was not the same person who'd been sitting there the day before.
Filmmakers cast Donald Pleasance to take over the role.
You only live twice, Mr. Bond.
Other performers travel from Japan.
We brought a small team of genuine Japanese martial art experts to England.
And I remember Bob saying to us, "Now don't outdo the ninjas because they have a great deal of pride." Well, I found in the end that their pride didn't extend to going up into the roof and coming down the ropes. They didn't actually like heights.
The final assault on the volcano base requires over 100 stuntmen.
It was just a bit awe-inspiring when you first go there and you look at this huge structure and realise you have to jump off it.
Well, I had complete confidence in Bob and his boys, you know.
Bob Simmons wanted everybody coming down ropes as quickly as possible. Well, it would have been impossible to slide down the ropes without burning your hands. So I introduced a gag, which I'd used on a previous film, of a piece of hose pipe.
As you get near the bottom, you turn the hose pipe on like a brake shoe.
And you could come down very, very rapidly indeed. In fact, one of the stuntmen came down so rapidly, he broke both his ankles.
That was the first ninja sliding down the ropes, one-handed firing a machine gun.
We had about 40 or 50 stuntmen coming down like bullets. And even now, it's still quite an impressive sequence.
The film helps usher in the use of mini trampolines for stunts.
And it worked very well, except on one occasion when a stuntman who was possibly less expert on the trampoline than in other skills, he missed the bed that he was meant to be landing in, landed on his head, and became one of the walking wounded.
Despite the jaw-dropping action, filmmakers must still complete the movie's most dangerous scene.
Once that accident had happened, there was not much more we could do out there because the Japanese were not prepared to let us fire rockets over their national park area.
Second Unit Director Peter Hunt finds a location in Spain where the sequence can be completed.
We did all the rest of the firing over the Sierra Nevada, which looked much like the background in Japan.
Cameraman Johnny Jordan could not be there, but he is not forgotten.
Johnny was in the best hospital. He had the best care for months and months and months on end. I mean, no producer could have been so considerate.
And I must say, Cubby and Harry were wonderful with him. They put him in the London clinic. He had the best surgeons. They had the best of everything.
The doctors would strive very, very hard to try and enable him to keep his leg.
And he said, Cubby, I want this foot taken off.
He was in terrible pain, and it didn't seem to heal.
And Cubby said, are you absolutely sure that's what you want? That's a very big decision. He said yes, so they did.
And he was up and running in no time. It was quite incredible.
After recovering, Johnny Jordan goes on to work on numerous films. His amazing aerial photography is featured on the next James Bond adventure on Her Majesty's Secret Service.
He only wanted to fly, though, because that was he loved that.
Flying was a natural for him. You know, he wasn't frightened.
While filming Catch-22, in a freak accident, Johnny Jordan falls out of an airplane and to his death. His cinematography lives on as part of the James Bond legacy. In the summer of 1967, You Only Live Twice becomes another thrilling chapter for 007. Despite the challenges and dangers, the filmmakers literally look death in the face to deliver a sweeping, elegant adventure. James Bond proves you only live twice, and twice is the only way to live.